The streets were quiet under the dim glow of streetlights as 17-year-old Malik walked home after a long evening at his friend's house. Dressed in a hoodie and jeans, he was focused on the music playing through his headphones, unaware of the police car creeping up behind him. Suddenly, bright headlights pierced the darkness, and the screech of tires broke the stillness of the night. Two officers stepped out of the vehicle, their expressions stern. "Hey, you! Stop right there!" one barked, pointing a flashlight directly at Malik's face. Confused and startled, Malik instinctively froze, pulling off his headphones. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice trembling. The officers exchanged glances. "You match the description of someone we're looking for," one said. Malik's heart pounded. He had no idea his quiet walk home was about to take a shocking turn that would change everything. Before we dive into this powerful story, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss more inspiring and thought-provoking videos like this one. Your support helps us share impactful stories that matter. Now, let's get started. Malik Johnson was no ordinary teenager. At just 17, he was an honors student at Lincoln High School, known for his sharp intellect and a genuine drive to make a difference. On weekends, he volunteered at the local community center, tutoring younger kids in math and helping organize food drives. His father, Mayor Thomas Johnson, was proud of the values he had instilled in Malik: a strong work ethic, a sense of justice, and the courage to stand up for what was right. Malik had grown up hearing about equality and fairness, yet tonight he was about to confront the harsh reality of how society often fell short of those ideals. As he stood under the harsh beam of the police officer's flashlight, Malik felt an unfamiliar chill of fear. "I'm just heading home," he said, raising his hands slightly to show he meant no harm. "I live a few blocks away." The officers exchanged skeptical glances. "What's in your pockets?" one demanded, moving closer. "Just my phone and keys," Malik replied calmly, trying to keep his voice steady. He slowly reached for his pockets, but the officer snapped, "Don't move!" Malik froze, his heart pounding so loudly he thought they could hear it. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he said, his voice quivering with a mix of fear and frustration. "That's what they all say," the second officer muttered, stepping forward to pat him down. Malik's mind raced. How could this be happening? He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't doing anything remotely suspicious. "I'm telling you, I didn't do anything," Malik tried again, his tone firmer now. "I'm just a student heading home. My name is Malik Johnson. My dad is—" "Save it," the first officer interrupted, waving off his explanation. "We've heard every excuse in the book." Tears of anger and humiliation welled in Malik's eyes as they pulled his arms behind his back, snapping on handcuffs. "You don't even know me!" he shouted, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "That's enough," the officer barked, tightening his grip. The street was eerily quiet, except for the distant hum of passing cars. A neighbor's porch light flickered on, and Malik noticed a shadowy figure stepping out, phone in hand, recording the scene. He felt a small flicker of hope that someone might believe him, someone might see what was really happening. But the officers ignored the bystander, focused entirely on their preconceived narrative. To them, Malik was just another suspect, another statistic. As the patrol car loomed closer, Malik felt the weight of his circumstances crushing him. This wasn't just about him. It was about something much larger, something he had only read about or seen on the news. And now he was living it. The injustice of it all burned in his chest, but for the moment, all he could do was comply. As Malik stood on the sidewalk, his wrists bound tightly in handcuffs, his mind raced through a whirlwind of emotions: fear, anger, confusion. The cold metal bit into his skin, a cruel reminder of the unjust reality he was facing. He had done nothing wrong. All he wanted was to go home, but now he was standing in the harsh glow of the police car's headlights, treated like a criminal. The sound of a voice broke through the tense silence. "Hey, what are you doing to him?" A woman in her late 30s emerged from a nearby house, phone in hand, recording the scene. She took a step forward, her tone laced with indignation. "That boy isn't doing anything. Why are you arresting him?" The officers stiffened, glancing at each other. "Ma'am, step back," one of them said firmly, gesturing for her to stay away. "No, I won't step back," she shot back, her voice rising. "I see what you're doing. You're profiling him because he's black, aren't you? This is wrong." The second officer, clearly irritated, turned toward her. "Ma'am, this is a police matter. If you don't step back, we'll have to detain you for obstructing justice." Malik's heart sank as he watched the exchange. He wanted to tell the woman to stop, to avoid getting herself in trouble, but his voice wouldn't come. He was paralyzed, not by the handcuffs, but by the overwhelming weight of the moment. The first officer returned his focus to Malik, patting him down roughly. "What do we have here?" he muttered, pulling out Malik's phone and wallet. He flipped through the wallet dismissively, not even noticing the student ID inside. "Why are you doing this?" Malik finally managed to ask, his voice trembling. "I told you, I'm just walking home. I haven't done anything." "Keep quiet," the officer snapped. "You're out here looking suspicious late at night. That's reason enough." Malik's chest tightened. Suspicious? For walking? For existing? He struggled to hold back tears, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him cry. Instead, he glanced at the woman, who was still recording. Her defiance gave him a shred of hope. Maybe someone would see the truth. The woman stepped closer again, ignoring the officer's warnings. "This is harassment. I'm recording everything, and I'm not going to let you get away with this." The second officer moved toward her threateningly. "Ma'am, if you don't put that phone away, we'll arrest you too." Malik watched helplessly as the woman hesitated, her hands shaking but still holding her phone steady. "Go ahead," she said, her voice wavering but resolute. "I'm not scared of you." The tension in the air was suffocating. Malik's thoughts spiraled as the officers continued their baseless search. Why won't they listen? What did I do to deserve this? How did my skin color become a threat? The first officer, clearly frustrated, shoved Malik toward the police car. "Get in!" he barked. Malik stumbled but managed to stay upright. He turned to the woman, his eyes pleading. "Thank you," he whispered, barely audible. She nodded, her expression a mix of anger and sorrow. "Don't worry," she said softly. "People will see this. They'll know." As Malik was forced into the back seat of the police car, his mind kept replaying the same thought. This isn't fair. This isn't right. He thought of his father, a man who had always taught him to trust the system, to believe in justice. What would his father think if he saw this? Would he even believe it? Inside the car, Malik's fear turned into humiliation. The officers talked casually in the front seat, as if he wasn't even there. "These kids think they can do whatever they want," one said with a dismissive chuckle. Malik clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. He wanted to scream, to fight back, but he knew it would only make things worse. So he sat in silence, his mind a storm of emotions. Outside, the woman continued to record. Her phone trained on the car as it pulled away. Malik caught one last glimpse of her, standing firm under the streetlights before the patrol car turned a corner and disappeared into the night. The ride to the station felt endless. Malik stared out the window, the city blurring past him. His thoughts drifted to his family. How will I explain this? Will they even believe me? Will anyone care? Tears finally escaped, sliding down his cheeks silently. He wiped them away quickly, ashamed of his vulnerability even though no one was watching. For the first time in his life, Malik felt completely powerless. He wasn't just a teenager anymore. He was a statistic, a target. And he realized with heartbreaking clarity that no amount of good grades or community service could shield him from the prejudice that had defined this night. Malik sat in the cold, sterile holding cell at the police station, his mind racing with disbelief and fear. The walls felt like they were closing in, and the fluorescent lights buzzed above, casting a harsh glare on the grimy floor. Every second dragged on, his thoughts spiraling into panic. Would they believe him? Would this ruin his future? How did this happen? The officers, meanwhile, were reviewing their paperwork at the desk, treating the situation as routine. "Another night, another troublemaker," one of them muttered, completely unaware of the storm brewing just outside their small, confined world. Suddenly, Malik heard the faint buzz of a notification, then another, and another. The officers exchanged confused glances as their phones started to ping incessantly. The woman's video had hit social media, and it was spreading like wildfire. The caption read, "Young black teen wrongfully detained by police for walking home. When will this stop?" The video showed everything. The officers stopping Malik, their dismissal of his attempts to explain, the woman's pleas for justice, and, most damningly, the moment Malik revealed his name, Malik Johnson. Comments flooded in. "This is disgusting. Do they even know who he is? Profiling at its worst. Shame on these officers. Wait until they find out his dad is the mayor." Within minutes, the video reached local activists, then journalists, and finally, the mayor's office. Thomas Johnson was in the middle of a late-night briefing when his assistant burst in, phone in hand. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, her voice urgent. As the mayor watched the video, his face hardened. Anger, worry, and disbelief all warred within him. That was his son in the backseat of a police car, humiliated, treated like a criminal. "Where is he now?" the mayor demanded. "They've taken him to the station," his assistant replied. "We need to act fast. This is already trending online." At the station, the officers were beginning to sense the gravity of the situation. Calls flooded the department, and their commanding officer stormed in, looking furious. "What the hell is going on here?" he barked. The officers glanced at each other, clearly confused. "We detained a suspect," one began, but the commanding officer cut him off. "That suspect is the mayor's son." For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of the realization sinking in. The officers' faces turned pale. "What?" one of them stammered. Just then, the door to the station burst open, and in walked Mayor Thomas Johnson, flanked by two of his aides. His normally composed demeanor was replaced with raw, visible anger. His voice boomed across the room. "Where is my son?" The officers scrambled to respond, their confidence from earlier replaced with nervous stammering. "He's in the holding area, sir," one of them managed to say. The mayor didn't wait for an invitation. He pushed past them, heading straight to the back of the station. Malik looked up as the door to the holding cell swung open, and for the first time that night, he felt a wave of relief. "Dad," Malik whispered, his voice trembling. Thomas Johnson knelt down, gripping his son's shoulders tightly. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softening for a moment. Malik nodded, though the tears in his eyes betrayed the weight of the night's events. The mayor turned back to the officers who had followed him, his anger flaring again. "How dare you treat my son like this?" he demanded. "Did you even bother to listen to him? To look at his ID? Or did you just assume he was guilty because of the color of his skin?" The officers were at a loss for words. We thought he matched the description of a suspect," one tried to explain. "Thought? You thought? That's your excuse for profiling an innocent teenager?" the mayor roared. His voice echoed through the station, and everyone in the room froze, watching the confrontation unfold. Meanwhile, outside the station, a crowd had begun to gather. News crews, local activists, and concerned citizens stood with signs and cameras demanding answers. The woman who had recorded the video was there too, sharing updates in real time. When the mayor and Malik finally emerged from the building, The crowd erupted in a mix of cheers and angry chants. Microphones were thrust toward them, reporters shouting questions. "Mayor Johnson, what's your response to your son being profiled by the police? Do you think this reflects a deeper issue within law enforcement? How does it feel to experience this kind of injustice personally?" Thomas Johnson raised a hand, calling for silence. When the crowd settled, he began to speak. "This is not just about my son," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "This is about a broken system that allows prejudice and profiling to thrive. Tonight, my son was humiliated, dehumanized, and treated as less than because of the color of his skin. But this isn't new. This is the reality that so many black and brown people face every day, and it has to stop." The crowd listened intently as he continued. "I've spent my career fighting for justice and equality, but tonight, I felt what so many parents feel. The fear that no matter how good or law-abiding your child is, they are not safe from discrimination." He turned to Malik, placing a hand on his shoulder. "My son is not a suspect. He is a student, a volunteer, a young man with dreams and potential, and he deserves to walk down the street without fear, just like everyone else." The crowd erupted into applause and chants of support. Malik looked out at the sea of faces, his heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and determination. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something bigger. Back inside the station, the officers sat in stunned silence, watching the events unfold on the news. They had started the night feeling powerful, but now they felt exposed, their actions scrutinized by the world. The video continued to spread, sparking conversations across the country. It wasn't just about Malik anymore. It was about systemic racism, about accountability, and about the need for change. For Malik, the night had been a nightmare, but as he stood beside his father, surrounded by people who believed in justice, he realized something important. He had a voice, and he was going to use it. This was his turning point, a moment that would shape not just his life, but the lives of countless others. The events of the previous night sent shockwaves through the city, igniting outrage and sparking vital conversations. By morning, the story had gone viral. News outlets, social media, and community groups were all abuzz with discussions about Malik's wrongful detention and the systemic racism that allowed it to happen. Mayor Thomas Johnson, known for his eloquence and unwavering dedication to justice, decided to take swift and public action. He scheduled a press conference at City Hall, determined to address the issue head-on and ensure that the incident involving his son became a catalyst for meaningful change. The room was packed with journalists, community leaders, and concerned citizens. Cameras flashed, and the murmur of voices filled the air. Malik sat in the front row, his mother beside him, her hand resting reassuringly on his shoulder. Though still shaken, Malik's presence sent a powerful message. This wasn't just about politics. This was personal. When the mayor stepped onto the podium, the room fell silent. His usually composed demeanor carried a visible intensity, his expression reflecting both his anger and his resolve. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Last night, my son, Malik, became another example of the injustice and prejudice that plague our society. He was profiled, humiliated, and detained, not because of anything he did, but because of the color of his skin. As a father, watching my child endure such treatment was devastating. But as your mayor, it was a stark reminder of the systemic racism that persists in our city and beyond." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. What happened to Malik was not an isolated incident. It's part of a larger pattern, a pattern that has harmed countless individuals and families, stripping them of their dignity, their safety, and in some cases their lives. And this pattern must end. Mayor Johnson's voice grew stronger as he continued. "For far too long, we have allowed biases and stereotypes to dictate the way people are treated in this country. We have turned a blind eye to the injustices faced by communities of color. But today, I am here to say that enough is enough. We cannot continue to allow systemic racism to go unchecked. He gestured toward Malik, who watched his father with a mixture of pride and emotion. My son was lucky. He had someone recording, someone who cared enough to speak out. But what about those who don't have a camera to capture the injustice? What about the voices that go unheard? We cannot let this moment pass without action. The mayor outlined several immediate steps his administration would take to address systemic racism in law enforcement. First, we will implement mandatory bias training for all officers, focusing on dismantling racial stereotypes and fostering empathy. Second, we will create a civilian oversight board to review incidents of misconduct, ensuring accountability and transparency. Third, we will prioritize the recruitment of diverse candidates in our police force, so our officers better reflect the communities they serve. His words drew applause from the audience, but his tone remained serious. These are just the first steps. Real change requires more than policies. It requires a shift in mindset. It requires each of us to confront our own biases and challenge the status quo. The mayor's voice softened as he addressed the emotional toll of the incident. As a father, this has been one of the hardest experiences of my life. Watching my son go through this was heartbreaking, but it also gave me a glimpse into what so many parents endure every day. The fear that their child will be treated unfairly, or worse, simply because of the color of their skin. He paused, visibly moved. I am speaking today not just as a mayor, but as a father who refuses to let his son or anyone else's child grow up in a world where this kind of injustice is acceptable. We must do better. We owe it to Malik, to every family affected by systemic racism, and to future generations. The press conference sent ripples across the city and beyond. The mayor's emotional speech resonated with many, sparking support from activists, community leaders, and ordinary citizens. Calls for accountability grew louder, putting immense pressure on the police department. The department's chief issued a formal apology to Malik and his family, acknowledging the officer's misconduct and pledging to cooperate fully with the upcoming reforms. We failed to uphold the values of fairness and equality, the chief admitted during a televised statement. We are committed to rebuilding trust with our community and ensuring that incidents like this never happen again. The two officers involved in Malik's detention were placed under investigation. Their actions were scrutinized not just for their treatment of Malik, but for how their implicit biases may have influenced their judgment. The incident became a case study in the importance of addressing racism within law enforcement. In the days following the press conference, the community rallied around Malik and his family. Vigils, marches, and forums were organized, each event emphasizing the need for unity and systemic change. The woman who had recorded the video became a local hero, her bravery celebrated as a reminder of the power of speaking out. Malik, initially hesitant to step into the spotlight, found himself at the center of a growing movement. Encouraged by his father and the overwhelming support he received, he began to share his story at schools, community centers, and events. "This isn't just about me," he told one audience. "This is about making sure no one else has to go through what I did." Weeks later, the first steps of the mayor's reforms were put into action. Officers began attending mandatory bias training, and the newly formed Civilian Oversight Board convened its first meeting. Community police dialogue sessions were held, creating spaces for open conversations and rebuilding trust. For Malik and his family, the incident remained a painful memory, but it also became a turning point. It had shone a light on the city's flaws, but it also sparked hope, a hope that things could change, that progress was possible. As Malik stood on a stage at a community rally, addressing a crowd of supporters, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known before. "This isn't the end of the story," he said. "This is just the beginning. Together we can create a world where fairness and justice aren't just words, they're reality. The crowd erupted in applause, and for the first time since that fateful night, Malik smiled. He knew the road ahead would be long, but he also knew he wasn't walking it alone. The journey toward justice had begun, and it was a journey worth taking. Malik sat at his desk, staring at the photo on his wall, a picture of him and his father taken during his middle school graduation. In the photo, he was beaming with pride, holding a certificate, while his father's hand rested proudly on his shoulder. That boy had believed in fairness, justice, and the goodness of the world. But after that night, Malik wasn't so sure anymore. The memories of the incident still played in his mind like a bad dream. The blinding police lights, the cold metal handcuffs, the dismissive tones of the officers. He remembered the shame, the helplessness, and the questions that raced through his head. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? For days after, Malik had struggled with anger and sadness. He thought about how quickly he had been judged, not as a person, not for his actions, but for the color of his skin. It was a painful truth to face, one that countless others had experienced before him. But amidst the pain, something unexpected began to grow: resolve. Malik started speaking with his father about ways to address systemic racism. He read books and watched documentaries about civil rights leaders and modern activism. He attended forums and listened to others share their stories. Slowly, he realized that his experience could be more than just a source of pain. It could be a call to action. One afternoon, Malik shared his reflections at a youth leadership summit. "When that happened to me," he said, "I felt powerless. But I've learned that sharing my story gives me power, and it gives others hope. I've realized that change doesn't come from staying silent. It comes from speaking up, even when it's hard." The room erupted in applause, and Malik felt a spark of pride. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was an advocate. He wanted to make sure that no other teenager had to feel the way he did that night. Malik's story became a rallying cry for young people across the city. He worked with his father's administration to organize workshops in schools where students learned about implicit bias and the importance of empathy. He helped launch a social media campaign, #StandWithMalik, encouraging people to share their experiences with racism and amplify the call for change. At the end of each event, Malik posed a question to the audience. How would you feel in my place? Imagine being judged for something you can't control. Imagine feeling like your humanity doesn't matter. Now ask yourself, what can you do to make sure this doesn't happen to someone else? To everyone watching Malik's story unfold, the message is clear. This isn't just about one boy, one family, or one city. It's about all of us. Racism isn't just a problem for those who experience it, it's a problem for society as a whole. So now it's your turn to reflect. How would you feel in his place? Share your thoughts, stand against racism, and be a voice for change. Together we can create a world where no one is judged by the color of their skin, a world where fairness and justice truly exist for everyone. Your voice matters. Speak up, take action, and make a difference.